Hey guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is hopefully the first of many, so thanks for making the time. I think it'd be good to go around the table and just introduce the three of us. Sitting straight across from me is the famous Brad Ayres. Brad, tell us about yourself. Where are you from? Where did you come from? How did you end up here in Nashville? And what do you do?
Boy, there's a lot of questions there. Thank you for the intro. I appreciate that. I am, as Bob said, I'm Brad Ayres.
It's okay. Go ahead.
As Bob said, I'm Brad Ayres. I own and manage a digital ad agency here in the Nashville area. But my background is I grew up in Detroit.
Motor City.
The Motor City. I got to give a shout out to my boys in the D. The D.
Are you an Eminem?
Is that what they call it?
Are you an Eminem fan?
And it's funny. My very first house I bought was on 8.5 Mile.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 8.5 Mile.
Get out of here.
Yeah, right. A few blocks down from the booby trap. Yes. Yeah. And
I'm sure there's many childhood stories we'll get into.
Yes. So Eminem was a little bit younger than me, so I'm old school. I'm OG. He's new G. Anyways, grew up in the ad world in Detroit, which back in the day, Detroit had the most Fortune 500 companies that were located and headquartered in Detroit. So it was a big ad town. It still is a fairly big ad town.
Was that because of the automobile industry and all that good stuff?
Yes.
Okay. So they were ad companies focused on the auto industry.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And so I worked for companies like Campbell Ewald, which at that time had 1,000 or more than 1,000 employees. I worked on the Chevrolet account. I worked on a lot of large brand accounts. And when I was in my 30s, young 30s, I got the itch to move out to LA, do more entertainment-focused projects. And I spent 8 years in Los Angeles. And for some reason, my wife and I were inspired to look at Nashville. And never had Nashville on my radar, never thought about Nashville. Didn't know a lot about Nashville, and here I sit.
So when you moved to Los Angeles,
but I love it. Yes.
Did you start your own company there?
I did, thank you.
So you worked in Detroit, kind of worked for a big agency. I think if I remember correctly, you told me you kind of partnered with someone on something there. You had an agency, and then when you moved to LA, you were totally kind of started your own thing.
Correct, yep.
Okay. And now you run Anthem Republic here in Franklin.
Yes. So, yeah, my agency is Anthem Republic, anthemrepublic.com.
Thank you, Brad.
What does that mean? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, so Anthem Republic's an interesting name. I for some reason, when I thought about the name, I always felt, being in Nashville, I think, is such a music town, even though Detroit is also a very big music town. But I always thought about what I did for clients is I really helped them develop their anthem, to develop their song that everyone can get behind. And then the Republic is a group of people with a common goal, right? So the Republic. So this idea of building, helping companies really see who they are, to help define what their anthem is, but then to help get all of their constituents, their employees, their customers to get behind it. And I wanted a name that wasn't very specific to my industry. We do a lot of different things in our company. We're not just a digital agency, but we're developing products internally, and we're doing some some unique things for a digital agency. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Mr. Ken Ott from New York.
Queens, baby.
Can you correct his accent?
No.
I can go Bostonian if you want. Or New Jersey.
Tommy. Yes, from
Coffee.
New York.
Coffee.
I got my coffee.
You got to start with if you really want to learn a New York accent, this is somebody who has
You gotta
notes.
talk to my mom.
you gotta call Ken's mom up and have a conversation with her. It's funny because
Have you met her?
No, I haven't, but I'd like to.
Everyone that meets her is like, okay, I get it now. Yeah.
Your mom's Italian, right?
Yeah,
From
yeah,
New
but
York.
she's like Brooklyn accent, straight.
It's
Brooklyn.
funny because it's like my wife and I always joke around because when my wife spends some time in a different location, like if she goes to London, she'll be speaking in a British accent.
There you go, right?
Within like a week, and she doesn't even know she does it. She adapts to the location, so she should hang out a little bit with you and come back.
And that'd be good. It's
Yeah.
not good for you though.
Did your mom call you Kenneth? Did your mom call you Kenneth?
Only when I was I was in trouble. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now I'm going back to the Kenneth a little bit.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that you're growing up and you're
Maturing,
becoming
you
a
know,
man.
Yeah, maturing.
You never went by Kenny?
There are some reasons we can get into, but there are also some outside reasons why I'm going to Kenneth.
Kenneth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, tell us about your.
You need a logo for your work?
Yeah. Can you help me?
No, you got people, I'm sure.
So how did
I
you
need an
end up
anthem.
in Nashville? Well, tell us. You grew up in New York City, right?
Grew up in New York City. Grew up in Queens. And without going all into it,
Please do.
you can cut some of this out. So grew up in Queens. I went to, we were zoned for certain schools in Queens, right? And so growing up in where I was, like our zone schools were really, really bad. And so my parents made very little money. My dad was part of the, they're going to hear this and be like, you sell this out. My parents didn't make that much money. My dad was in the union for what is now Verizon. It was the telephone company. It was a few other things. And so, but they kind of thought it was important to get us into a school that would keep us safe. And so we went to this small private school in Queens, and I did through 8th grade. And so I'm the oldest of 4 boys. So after 8th grade, we went into, there wasn't really an option, at least a good option of going to another private school for high school. And so my options were either I can go to the public zone school that I was zoned for, which was actually one of the worst schools in the country at the time, is Franklin K. Lane. And back then they had metal detectors and all that kind of stuff going on.
So this is Brooklyn, but people think of Brooklyn now. It's like this cool hip place.
Well, this is
to
actually
live.
Queens, but yeah, no, and Queens still is not gentrified.
Right.
So it's still not very cool. Brooklyn is. But at the time, Brooklyn was really, really bad. And so I went from 8th grade, and then the only option was either you go to a public school or you get into a specialized school. And there were, I think, 4. I might be wrong with that, but there were 4 specialized schools at the time. And they were kind of spread out. Like one was in Brooklyn, another one was in Manhattan. And so you kind of apply like you're going into college. And so it was literally do or die. Like get into the specialized school.
What was the specialized school? What did they do? What was the specialty?
They had different specialties, whether they be math or science or different things. But the sort of key with each one of those schools was you chose a major, and you had a test into the school. And so I got into Brooklyn Technical High School, and that was in downtown, sort of Flatbush area of Brooklyn, right across the street from Fort Greene Park, sort of where the Barclays Center is today, but it wasn't there back then. And that area was jacked up. It was pretty bad.
So what was your major?
My major was computer science back in this was 96.
Okay.
But that was a huge trajectory. So like I went from a class of 40 kids to a class of 2,000 kids and a total school of 9,000 kids.
Wow.
So it was 9 floors in downtown Brooklyn, and take 3 trains to get there, fight all walks of life to get in and out and back with just the money in your pocket. And I cried for like the first 2-3 weeks of high school. It was it was pretty traumatic, but it was transformative at that period of time. So that was a big part of my life, like going through that, sort of maturing quickly, and then being able to choose a major and being able to be in computer science when basically the internet and all that kind of stuff was sort of just like really getting momentum. I'm fortunate to where I started my first business in high school, and I've sort of been that ever since.
That's really cool. Wow. So, name of your company?
My current company is called Medicake, or current company. Okay. My company is called Medicake, and so that's sort of like, if you don't know how to say that or you want to remember it, it's like I never met a cake I didn't love. We are, and I'm one of two founders. I'm a co-founder. We're an e-commerce growth team, we say.
Okay.
And
yeah, you guys do great work. And so would you say your main focus, whereas Brad's kind of more of digital and traditional agency kind of branding, marketing, overall strategy, you guys focus on e-commerce, build outs and scales, or marketing, or both, or?
Yeah, focus on e-commerce. We do certain. We have 3 areas that we kind of work inside of, and even inside of those areas, we try and only stay within what we're really, really good at. And so we do a lot of paid marketing, and inside of paid marketing, we don't do just everything. And then inside of building sites and that kind of stuff, we stay in sort of certain bounds. So we do a little bit of that, a lot of optimization. And then we do email. That's sort of our third specialty.
Shopify, your big main platform?
Shopify is probably the one that I would say 80% of people are on right now. And we work with, certain types of clients too. Like, we don't just work with anybody. We typically say viral brands and global brands are really where our sweet spot is, because where most of the people, for us, the reason why anyone would come to us is for our experience in working with those types of brands and helping them actually grow to a certain level. And so that's kind of a little bit about us.
Great. Well, my name is Bob Hutchins, and like you guys, I grew up in a big city. Actually lived all over the world. My dad worked for the government. So I was born in Panama. We moved back to the States, lived there a few years, moved back to Puerto Rico for a while, then moved to Miami, grew up there most of my life, formative years. I always, like you guys, had a knack for technology, for business. My dad worked for the FAA, the government, the Federal Aviation Administration. He was always on the technical side. So we were the first family on the block to usually have a computer, or I'm dating myself going way back, but calculators and things like that were kind of the latest and greatest tech.
The Commodore VIC-20.
Yeah, exactly, that stuff. TRS-80s, and my dad would build computers.
Hey, Ken, just so you know, those are called computers.
Yeah.
You weren't.
I think I'm almost as old as you.
Talk to your parents about those.
Yeah, I have.
I had one of them.
Did you? TRS-80?
I was hacking into
Double
the
floppies?
Pentagon with those.
Yeah, I have vivid memories of my dad building electronics and computers, and when I had science projects at school, he would always help me do like the coolest things. He always had the soldering gun and all kinds of stuff. He wasn't an inventor; he was more of a tinkerer. But he understood electronics and all that kind of stuff. So I was always around that, and so I always had this penchant desire for like the latest and greatest and newest technology and how tech was going to change the world. I really thought after I got out of high school and went to college that I would go into Christian ministry full time. So I pursued that for a little while. But even in that, working for nonprofits and organizations, I always gravitated toward entrepreneurial business. And then early, mid-90s, the advent of early internet and some of the online services, got super interested in that and just jumped into that full force. Ended up getting married and moving to Nashville a couple of years after, around end of the 90s when Ken was entering high school. And we moved here and been here ever since. Started my own business, ran an agency for 17 years, similar to what Brad's doing, and had a great time. It's where I first met you, Ken. We connected, and you were
12 years.
Yeah, contractor with me for a while, and programmer, developer. So it's been a fun run. I closed that down back in 2017. and have been doing some kind of contract and consulting and working with a couple of companies since then. But that's kind of high level. I'm sure we'll go deeper into each one of our stories. But for the purposes of this first podcast, I'd love to kind of get to know you better, get the listeners to know you better. Question that Brad came up with that I thought was kind of cool. So Brad, I'll let you ask Ken the first question.
Oh, all right. I think this was before we started this podcast, we started talking about what the podcast is going to do and the overall narrative of the podcast, where it would go. And we just started with just questions, things that we'd like to talk about, things that we think are important, especially to something that we could give back to listeners. And one of the questions I think that Ken, you wrote is for us to discuss our superpowers, things that we feel give us strength, things that are natural gifts of ours, things that have helped us in our businesses that we feel like maybe even things that we didn't think were very rare, but then as we've developed our businesses and our careers, we've noticed that a lot of people don't have these other superpowers that we thought everybody did, and things that you can see there's, from those superpowers, you've seen your ability to do something unique.
Yeah.
So what's your superpower?
Yeah. So I'll also say that.
Wait, just so you know, Ken is not wearing his S t-shirt.
I am wearing a shirt that says Growth Rebel.
Yeah,
and
that's a superpower.
I'm belovedly known sometimes as the Chief Growth Rebel.
Just so the listeners know that Ken has a line of t-shirts.
You can go to Medicake.com.
Medicake.com and buy his shirts that have very inspirational messages on them. And
true.
He is.
It's something I love.
I know you haven't given me one yet, though. That's what I'm still waiting for it.
I tried to.
He tried to
give me
a shirt, but the size wasn't.
Now I got called out. That's good. No, you're right, man. All right, I'll get on it. You'll have one in the mail today.
That's what they all say.
No, I am I'm someone that I love growth, and I'm inspired by it, and I seek it out, and I'm relentless in a lot of ways. When it comes to, I'm just doing as much as I can with the resources I have. I'm like, I really get excitement out of that. And so it also kind of drives me a little nuts. And that's part of the fiber of who we are as a company. I think that's part of our superpower, but I'm not going to say that's the one. I will say with this whole conversation and a lot of this in this particular podcast or whatever comes of this, I thought it'd be cool to know to have something that I would have wanted to hear from someone, from people that have done this before, right? So like in any line of business, especially in the agency or service world, people don't share any secrets. And I think a lot of times we think people have the answer, but they're actually also just suffering in silence, and I think that happens with a lot of businesses, and I definitely think that happens in the agency world. And so everyone's sort of like alone in their own little corner trying to invent their wheel, and someone else is trying to invent their wheel, and we're all trying to reinvent the same thing, and no one shares it. And I'm a big believer in shortcuts, right? So like when you can learn from someone else, you can shortcut all that stuff. And so this is an opportunity for just my selfish reason for me to learn from, especially Brad. Like I don't know where, like your background in agency world is very different than my background. And Bob, I've known you for 12 years, but you've got this ridiculous sort of vision, ability to see something 10 years out and predict it. And that's sort of, I think that's a superpower. So that's kind of like, I just think, getting into the superpower question, we all suffer alone in silence a lot of times, and we all think everyone, especially in the agency world, everyone thinks everyone's a competitor because everyone sort of does everything, which, I'm sort of against and trying to get better at that as a company as well. But really what I've found is I approach anyone who may be considered a competitor of mine as they're probably not a competitor, right? Like at the end of the day, they're probably really good at something that's different than what I'm really good at.
Yeah.
And so this idea of like transparency and collaboration, which is actually, it's happening more and more these days.
Sure.
But it's definitely something that we've kind of aggressively gone after. And sometimes I'll become friends with a company that's considered a competitor and they feel really awkward and weird. And it's really fun to actually go through that.
Don't you think that part of that is the culture of geography too? I know, Brad, you spent time in LA, and I work with a lot of people in and out of LA. Just Nashville has a lot of those people that move here, or we do business with people there, entertainment business, all that stuff. But there's a culture in Los Angeles, and it's probably changing, but there's a culture in Los Angeles that's very, hey, let's go do lunch. And it's always somebody has an ulterior motive, right? Always like you're hustling, you're connecting, but there's also an underlying kind of paranoia. Like, I'm not going to show you everything, and this guy might steal my connection or my lead. Whereas I think maybe in Nashville culture is very different than maybe even New York. Like Nashville's like,
absolutely.
Hey,
It's
let's
very
go hang out and
collaborative.
I'll tell you everything and let's collaborate. And people come here from other places and they're like, this is really weird. I don't know what to do with this. This is kind of unique. So we're kind of spoiled
For me,
in that, don't
it
you
was
think?
one of the things that attracted me to this to Nashville. So I never really said how I got from New York to Nashville, and don't have to go into that. But then in New York, it was very much like that. You'd sort of walk into a coffee house, and no one would talk to you. And if they did talk to you, it was really surface level, and you just nothing would come of it. What I thought was really cool about Nashville and Franklin is you'd walk into a coffee house, and this is back even 12, 15 years ago, and people would start conversations with you. And then it turns out they weren't just like blowing smoke, but they were actually really legit in what they were doing. And, there was opportunities to do it together or partner, or there was this genuine interest about, hey, what are you good at and how can we work together on pushing together a common goal? I think that is amazing, and it's really, really rare. I think it's something we're spoiled with here. But I think that it's what also makes this area thrive, and there's something that I think every industry and every area can learn from that.
Moving to Nashville from Los Angeles, I'm not originally from Los Angeles. I just lived there for about 8 years. One thing that I feel about this area, Nashville, is I feel at home, and it's a really weird feeling. Like I never really felt kind of connected within Los Angeles, even coming from a big city like Detroit. But you're right about the LA thing. Is I always felt like everyone was there for a purpose, and everyone was holding their cards tight, and I can see kind of why there's a. But here in Nashville, I feel like it was the first time where I felt like, I always call this thing. I have this thing I always call the active antagonist, and I think we all kind of do that in our own life. We always have to create an active antagonist, somebody who's going to be against you.
Right.
And I feel like here I've kind of let that down. I've let down that active antagonist in my life.
That's
to
good,
say
man.
that nobody's against me. The only person who is against me is me. is my own limitations and the box I put myself in. So for me, it's.
Would that be the same thing as like scarcity and abundance kind of mentality? Wouldn't you say? Like if you think there's an active antagonist,
Correct.
there's someone or something always there trying to compete or take away from you.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too deep into. We talked about this, Bob. Is all of us? I think we kind of we've learned a little bit more about the Enneagram, and I'm a 5 with a 4 wing, and we can discuss what that means later. But for me personally, I feel that I'm never going to have enough time, and there's a scarcity of time or money, or somebody in the future is going to take that away from me somehow. It's gonna disappear. So trying to make sure that my team, my business, my family is taken care of, it's always in my mind. So this place is a safer place for me because I feel like people are for me. They're not as much against me. I don't have.
That's a great kind of way to frame the importance of your business culture, your living culture, and how it influences your business success. Not to make too much of it, but depending on where someone might be listening to this from in the world or in the country, let's unpack that a little bit. How much does the local and regional culture affect your mindset and the way that you do business in a connected international world?
Well, first, I mean, scarcity is that idea of a scarcity mindset, and there's a lot of people that talk about that, is rarely something that helps you grow, right? Like, there's science behind it. There's a lot of reading behind it. There's even a lot to say that, like, if you have this, and I know none of us really do, but like, if you're in this sort of intentionally scarce and an intentional mindset of scarcity, it's hard to sell something to somebody because you wouldn't pay for it yourself, you know. And so it's just a self-deprecating kind of thing. And I think that certain areas do promote that, like. Maybe not anymore, but growing up in New York City, I felt that. I was an entrepreneur in New York City. I've never really worked for anyone else, and it was one of the reasons why I moved, because at the time it was not believed that you could actually be successful doing that, and there was no real, and it was really hard because there was, you know, the overhead is extremely high and that kind of stuff, and so the option was either go work for corporate America or be homeless.
It was just too big of a gap. So it's like you're either really poor or you're really rich.
You can't get past that success gap, or it's really hard to, you know.
It's interesting.
And so, and I do think that, you know, I mean, New Yorkers have a stigma attached to them, you know, maybe rightly so in some ways, but they're closed, you know, they're guarded.
Everyone wears black.
Yeah, they're guarded, and for good reason, right? You know, you go on the subway, you know, if you're not from New York, you're not supposed to talk to people on the subway, just not done.
But yet that's changing and evolving.
It is.
I mean, you go to Brooklyn today, and it's like I'm in East Nashville. You know,
Yes.
it's really cool entrepreneurial startups and solopreneurs and cool coffee shops, and
Certain areas are definitely breaking through that, and I think that's awesome because it's fun and it's life-giving. But it's taken a while to kind of break through that. But I do so to the question about certain areas, I do think that certain areas promote a certain mentality, and even I would guess in Detroit, in some ways, like I lived on the other side of the Great Lakes for 2 years, like closer to the Buffalo area, which is painful. I'll say that that.
Ken loves Buffalo.
Yeah, it was just painful, but the amount of snow and precipitation and gray, and I guess the economy was pretty difficult. You know, created a certain mental health, or you know, or not mental health, but a mentality that was pretty pervasive. You know.
Yeah, it's amazing what the weather can do to you.
Yeah.
You know, just alone growing up in Detroit, I mean, by February, everyone was ready to.
Yeah.
They were just it was so much gloom you'd see.
I grew up around sunshine and always warm. Like that was most of my life. And when I moved to Nashville, I loved many things about it, like you guys said. But it's taken me decades, literally, to really adjust to the change of seasons. And like by March, I am done. Like I'm done. Like
you're ready for.
I'm ready for, like, don't give me this long dragged out winter where it's 50, 60 one day and 20 the next. It's like, I'm just done. But I think you guys make good points about environments and also internal environments of what you're talking about. This idea of scarcity and abundance, I think it needs some clarification, because I think there's been people who have monopolized on that. And when people hear scarcity and abundance, they think, oh, you know, The Secret and abundance, and, you know, just think positive and riches will fall into my lap. I think it goes much deeper than that. It's an attitude of there is a finite amount of things and time and money and resources and leads and maybe even skill sets that if I don't get and grab my share of it, it's not going to be there tomorrow. Yeah. So, this is something that I've struggled with, to be honest with you.
Yeah, this is something that I think has been, I've believed our culture has taught, for me, I've been taught that for some reason, and I don't know why. I think it's kind of been a little bit of a lie and it's also self-induced, where I don't feel like there is going to be enough. There's enough. I don't want to participate or collaborate with another company like mine because there's only a limited
Budget.
finite amount of clients out there, and if I don't get one of those, then we won't survive. And that whole mentality is, in my mind, I've been fighting with for years, and I finally feel like I've kind of broke with that. I've never been overly competitive, especially in my business, but I haven't been proactively collaborative. And that's really where I think I've missed out. And I've missed out for me personally as my own personal growth, but I also missed out with our business growth, I think, is when you're small, you have to be collaborative, right? We're not a big we're not a big corporation. We don't have every resource internally into our company. So we need to look outside of who could we collaborate. And sometimes that's where the magic happens, and that's when you learn and you grow. And I feel like even at my age, I'm just learning that right now.
Do you feel like that collaboration idea is maybe one reason why it's hard to accept, especially in this world, is because there's this idea that there should be, and it's unrealistic, but like, when you get hired, you're the only one that, like, you do everything. Like, you can do everything the best, right, Brad? So I'm hiring you to do that.
That's debatable.
No, but as a client, there's this,
Sure.
it feels like you tell me because you know better, but it seems like traditionally it's like, I'm going to hire you, and me as the client, I don't, like, you're going to do everything internally. You're not going to outsource anything. You're going to, everything. You're the best at everything, which is just unrealistic.
Yes.
But there's this expectation.
Yes.
And so there's this feeling that we have to, like, make believe we can do everything. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I don't think we'd make believe we can do everything. I think we try to make, I think the clients that we serve, we're a lot of times doing many different things for them. It's not just very niched. And so we have to be a little bit of an expert in their, number one, in their business to be able to do more comprehensive campaigns, understand things a little deeper, do things, again, that we may not have a person internally that is an expert at. But I do believe in the idea that anything's possible, and you can find people to get something done.
Right.
Like, I believe, I go into it with confidence to know that we're smart enough to figure it out. Yeah. And we're smart enough to catch up quickly, or to find people who are already there and hire them if they're outside vendors, or learn ourselves quickly and exceed our customers' expectation.
I'm sorry, I wasn't saying that you
Know
make.
what you mean?
Yes, I wasn't saying that you make believe as in your company. I was saying I feel like there's this pressure.
There
for
is a
businesses
pressure.
to feel like
Absolutely.
they have to
Say yes to everything.
And that's a challenge for us.
and almost
because,
promote that that they're better at everything than they are, just so that they can please a potential client who expects that.
Correct. Yeah. So a lot of times what we do is we'll go in and we'll see opportunities of business within an existing customer. And we will go, we're really not designed to do that kind of work, but somebody's going to get that work. Might as well be us, you know? And that's a challenge, because we've done that before. And though we've done a decent job, we feel like we're a little bit out of our lane. And trying to say no to things sometimes is hard discipline, even though it might be best for the company in the end. Just saying no and letting something go and staying within a lane, becoming an expert in your lane. I think that's our biggest struggle, is we're kind of everything to everyone, and but we're not known for, a specific lane.
Yeah, and I think that's, Ken, you might want to like speak into this, is that it's where you guys, when you started and with your partner, with Bob, you guys jumped in and said, we're going to really focus and specialize on a couple of things really and do them really, really well. We don't want to be a branding agency, a design firm, a website company, a marketing company. We focus on e-commerce and scalability, and that's kind of our niche. Would that be accurate?
We went through, I would say it's an evolution. It's been my goal to do that, like, from the beginning, but it's just not always realistic to just do that, right? Like, let's just be honest. Like, when you're starting a business, you have to make money to
Sure.
start to keep going, right? And so you take on things that I'm not saying you should be what's the word?
Non-discretionary.
Yeah, like do things that you literally shouldn't be doing and create and steal money from people. I'm not saying you should do that, but sometimes you go outside of your like particular specialty in order to do more. But I think over time, like the more you can specialize and then talk about that, my theory is that the better life that you can have. And I'm going to get this wrong, but I heard recently that there are two basic business models: be the best or be the only one.
That's good.
And so, or be the cheapest. Sorry, there's three basic business models: the best, the only one, or the cheapest. I don't want to be the cheapest. Most people don't, but that's some people's business.
Volume, right?
Volume. That's like Walmart, for instance, or something like that, right? They know that that's what they are. It's hard to be the best. Like I want to be the best. That's like I run hard at that, but just truthfully, it's hard to be the number one and then stay there. So then how do you then being the only one is really the only other option. And that's about specializing.
That's good.
So, but as a service company, like it's just so counterintuitive, and you're literally saying no to certain revenue. And so I'm a believer of not just like of building a bridge to get to all those different phases. And so we've probably taken longer to specialize, and we're continuing to do that than I would have liked. But it also has been done in a financially responsible way. But I do think there's this pressure that we've felt, and getting back to the collaboration. And when it comes to specializing, you have to say, like, you go into something and someone may say, hey, I have this project, but I need you to I need all these things done, right? And we're like, well, we do these 5 things, and you need these 10, these other 5 things done. And so I think in the past it seemed like, and you guys tell me, like, again, there's this pressure to say, yeah, we can do everything, and maybe we do everything, but really maybe we hire other people to do other things, and then we make believe it's our company, and
right.
It becomes a really difficult. It's not intentionally dishonest or anything. It's with good intentions, but it becomes really hard to. I used to find that you'd spend a lot of effort just keeping that disguise going.
Right.
And then there's a lot of go between, because people can't talk to the client because they're not with the same company or whatever, all this kind of stuff. And so, what we started aggressively doing is saying, hey, we're killer at these things. Like there's no one better than us at these things. For over here, you need them done, but we know the best in the world that does that. And so we're going to bring those guys in. We'll, manage them or whatever, but it's going to be done by somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some people have not, there've been a few times, I mean, honestly, very rare times I would have expected more, and we work with really big companies and stuff like that. You'd expect to maybe have old school mentality, but turns out when you're the best at something, I'm not saying that I'm the best at something, but when you are the best at something, speaks.
You're the best to us.
Thank you.
You're the best.
Ken's the best.
The results speak louder than anything else, right? And so if you can prove results, there's someone I know that actually, I won't go into that. When you're the best at something, those results speak louder, and they'll kind of like, and people will actually get over all those issues more than you'd expect when you're actually able to influence results.
It goes back to the old saying is make yourself indispensable and you'll always have a job, right? Yeah. So it's the more that you can make yourself a high priority and indispensable to your client, in this case, and as we run agencies, that's something that I know, Brad, you and I have always talked about, is how can I become more and more indispensable to the client, to where, like Ken says, is in their mind, you become the best. Yeah. So, we can cut lots of other things on our budgets, but we can't cut Anthem Republic, or we can't cut Medicaid because they're the best, and where else would we go for that?
Something as a business owner, what I struggle with is the idea of where do you serve your own company versus serve your clients? And I know that sounds a little weird, but for instance, going to our clients, we don't like to say no. We don't like to say no, we can't do that. But at the same time, like for me, I struggle with the idea of I should say no, but I care so much. I know that we could do that for them somewhere. We could figure it out and actually and do what they're asking. But I'm so concerned about the success of my client and getting their objectives met, sometimes over our own business objectives. And I struggle with that because sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't for our business. Sometimes we go beyond what we should have and the client's happy, and we hope that somewhere down the road that's going to come back to us, either with a client who stays with us. And we've had a great track record with our clients. We don't have very many clients that come and go. We always feel like that's a value, and that's something that I've talked to my employees about, and I share as our mantra. This is what we do. We're here to serve the client, so very client focused. And a lot of the folks that we deal with are, not only just marketing managers or CMOs, but sometimes we deal with a lot of their C-suite. So it's engaging with their C-suite, really helping their C-suite. What I say, take them to the beach, like helping them see. We help them see what they're doing. We help them see their success. Obviously, we do a lot of digital campaigns where we're measuring true return on investment, so they see the success in our actions and the return on investment. But there's also this other layer of like just having our clients back and being there and having a seat at the table and saying, "Hey, I've got your back. I'll go and do things for you," even if I go back to our shop and go, "Oh no, how are we going to do this?" It's kind of like being that sidekick,
being an advocate for your client,
big time.
Do you think some of that comes from maybe the old kind of mentality? And I have struggled with this and processed it some, but I'd love to hear your guys' opinion, because it speaks to what you're saying, Brad. Is I know many times I did the same thing, so I certainly resonate with that, but I think there's this mentality that forever has been the customer's always right. If someone's paying you money, then you put them first and yourself last.
Yeah, I have that mentality.
Yeah, but I think that's not always right, and I think
always.
And
yes.
I think, Ken, you probably have an opinion on that.
Well,
come on.
I just want to note this one thing is that what I've seen is that I come back sometimes and my employees look at me like, "Oh no, what did you do?"
Like, what did you say yes to?
What did you say yes to? Or a lot of times, like right now, we're dealing with something where the client's pushing us. It's a new client pushing us to meet a deadline, right? And we know that it probably is going to take a little bit longer, maybe 20% longer than what their deadline is. And I'm getting pushback from my employees to say, "I don't think that we can do this within a time frame." I said, "Well, what can we do within a time frame? Maybe that's good. Maybe that's enough for them, and we can communicate that." So I'm always looking at a solution, but at the same time, I think that sometimes I want to make sure that my employees feel trusted and respected, and they don't feel like they're just they have to do whatever the client says or whatever Brad says or whatever else that people are demanding of them. That's just not reasonable, and to the point where they just feel like an engine and not like a human being anymore. And I don't want to ever do that to my employees, and I don't want to do that to us, as a business. So.
No, I mean,
you seem more like you have boundaries. I guess maybe I feel like sometimes I don't have.
Well, I had to fight my way through New York, so I've got some grit, I guess, that I bring to the table.
Well,
Look out for number one, buddy.
I'm from Detroit.
I'm just messing with you.
So I don't know, but I don't have the
Repping
same.
Detroit.
I don't have the same grit. Maybe.
You have way more than me. I do think for whatever reason, some of my upbringing has caused me to have maybe more boundaries or boundaries may not even be the right word. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just it's a certain personality. My goal as a company is to be the absolute best at what we do and to deliver amazing success that they couldn't even have never dreamed of for all our clients. And so that's the number one thing. I think, to me, logically, it only stands to reason that in order to do that, you have to be a really healthy company. And so when and we struggle with all these same things, but like we try to, as a rule, have have clear boundaries that we don't cross, so that, because it's kind of short. It's from a client standpoint, like, it's funny sometimes where you get asked to do things or you get squeezed and all that kind of stuff, and there is this mentality, I do believe, especially in the agency service world, where if I'm paying you money for something, you will be my servant. And I have the saying that service does not mean servant. And I think that not only is that inaccurate and is that even offensive, and I do think there is that mentality a bit sometimes, but also it is it's self-deprecating. Like, it doesn't get them to their goals. Like, in order for us to create success, for what you're doing, we need to be really healthy. If we're going to be really healthy, it means we can't be like, our entire team can't be stressed out and with no sleep. We need to have enough money to do what we're doing. We need to be able to pay our bills, so we're not worrying about paying the bills, so that we can worry about doing the thing for you. We need to be able to continue to get better, right? So all these things have to be there. We have to enjoy working with you, and you have to enjoy working with us, and all those kind of things, right? So that's kind of where it comes from. And then, I have this other saying, which is, this is someone else's, I'm sure I stole it, but it's just put your own mask on first, right? And so, like, in airlines, they say put your own mask on first. That seems counterintuitive, right? I want to help all my kids, but, like, you can't help your kids if you don't put your own mask on first. Yeah. And I think it's sort of the same in business world. It's like, hey, we're going to be healthy, which means we're going to say no to certain things. We're going to say we can't do certain things. We're going to say, hey, we can do other things. And all that creates the benefit, hopefully, to a client to say, hey, we're really good at these things. We do them well, and we're consistent in the production that we can create with them. And so that's the intention. That's my philosophy. It's hard to, living it out, like, it just doesn't work out that way every day, for sure.
Don't you think that goes back to what I help clients or customers or what I consult now a lot with is putting processes in place and putting policies and mindsets and documents and things in place that, as you evolve as a company, you already have boundaries and rules and again, processes that you don't have to think about it anymore. Yeah, I think that's the big missing piece in those of us who are entrepreneurial, those of us who always are thinking ahead, those of us who are really have bigger visions. We're thinking about the newest and the latest and the greatest and what we can do for that client. And so it's hard to say no, but if if you start to build a road and some lanes and some guardrails, as Ken's talking about, it really helps along the way because it removes your own emotional and personality out of the picture.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's people like me in our agency, and I think every agency needs this, but I think there's also, you need the other side, is there needs to be a client advocate, right? Somebody within a company or an organization that is like, my client, I'm an advocate for my client, right? And I'm going to kind of see things from my client's point of view and be more empathetic to my client. But then there's also the other side of we need to have, like you said, guardrails. We need to have boundaries. We need to serve our client, but we're not
a servant,
right? We have to have a servant heart, maybe, but we're not.
True.
We're not slaves to our client. We're not, and again,
I think that's
a
really good point.
We have to be healthy.
Yeah, but I think you sort of see two sides of that, right? And it's somewhere in the middle, right? Like, if you don't have a client advocate internally, right? If you don't have empathy, if you're not truly putting the client first in the long run, then none of that other stuff works out anyway. So,
well, it's like the old saying, I think it was Maya Angelou. She said, people will never remember as much what you said, but they will always remember how they feel when you said it.
Yes. Yeah. One of the things that I'm still learning too is that this idea that business runs by processes and then people run the processes, right? So your business should be run by processes, not just people. People just run the processes, right?
That's good. Yeah.
But you have to create process, and when you create process, you create very strong boundaries, and you have to force your client into that process that you build, and see and allow them to see the value of that process. That's the key. It's not just saying this is how we work. You have to work within our boundaries, but this is how we typically work, and it's for your benefit. Let me tell you how it's for your benefit. Here's how we get things done, because at the end of the day, we're going to give you what you've asked for. But to do that, we can't do it in this amount of time. We need one more week, because if you don't do this process, you're not going to get what you want. And we've done this many times. We're experts at it. We know that this is the right way to do it, and you need to trust us. Brad, that kind of mentality.
You're an expert at process, because I just know from your personality.
No, I'm not actually. I'm not.
But I know that, and this is probably a topic for another day, but in my experience, both personally and just seeing other companies, I would guess that that's not really the easiest thing for most agencies and service businesses to put in. Most of the time, it's a little chaotic, especially at the beginning. And there's this also idea that, hey, it's very reactive, right? Whatever the client wants, I'll do.
Yeah.
And so putting processes into place, taking the time to do it, and then also communicating how it's a benefit, is something I'm guessing a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of times it's process for me isn't fun.
Well, I mean, I think what we're all saying, and the thing that's counterintuitive is that what all three of us do on a daily basis, and what we do in our businesses, is simultaneously process and left brain oriented, but we're all very highly creative and provide creative results for our clients. That's why they hire us. So how do you provide an environment of freedom, creativity, and ultimately a beautiful product at the end for the client, or service, whatever it may be, or an e-commerce site or whatever, that functions head and shoulders above what they've had, and put restrictions on that? I think that for me is what the kind of struggle is, the give and pull.
It is a struggle,
because you want to be as creative and as honest and get the job done in the best way that you can. But like we're saying, you've got to put lanes and guardrails on to get there. You got to build the fastest road.
Going back to the superpower, your superpower, Ken. I know you started to talk a little bit about that. Tell me again your superpower and where you feel you're deficient, and how have you figured out, how have you teamed up with somebody internally, an employee that you brought in that could help do something that you just didn't have, you weren't built to do.
Yeah. And so company superpower is a little bit different than that question, so I won't answer that. But for me personally, like I'm a high driver, and I can see a vision, and I understand systems and the ability to kind of put things in place to get there. So that tends to make me a decent leader. I've had to work on a lot of qualities to get there, but I can see a vision. I can push that goal forward. I'm not as good at relationships. And turns out client business is a lot of relationships. It's not that I'm intentionally not trying to develop them, but my mind goes towards building a system and creating results, and that means for our clients and for ourselves. And so Bob, who's my business partner, actually is the complete opposite of me. He's all relationship. Or at least relationship first, and I think and very much a servant heart, and so he's really great, and he's also really intelligent. So he's really great at that top layer of one-on-one relationships with different people, clients, potential clients, whatever they may be, and helping guide them towards the result that they're looking for, and not even the result, but the right decision for them. A lot of times we'll talk with people, and I mean, we do our best to advise them without any without trying to get them to sign up with us if it doesn't make sense. Like, here's what's best for you. And so that might be a struggle for a lot of businesses, whether you're in service or not, right? To do that, like, it's always a challenge. He's really good at that, and so that's kind of maybe one way I've sort of like covered, or I don't even know if I intentionally did that way, but right now I'm really good at one thing. I'm really maybe not so good at some of these other areas, and right now I have some people around me that are a little better at those.
Yeah, and I think that's the benefit of having a partner or partners versus being, the only person that is the owner or runs. But it goes back to our original conversation about cooperation and just like I think we need that cooperation in other businesses to be creative and to learn and grow. I think we also need to find that other person if we can. And sometimes we can't, it's impossible, but if we can, is to find, and I think this is maybe our next podcast, to really talk about like, what's your personality, know yourself, have self-awareness, know what you're really good at and know what you're really not good at, and find how to make up for that. Because I think, what would Medicaid look like if you didn't have your partner and you were doing the one that was interfacing with all the clients today?
Yeah, it would be a mess. it would totally be a mess because we might be really good at it, but like, no one would want to work with us. So
Ken would just be saying, forget about it.
I sound a lot worse than I probably am, but maybe people would agree with that. That's probably what it would be. And I've heard a few things. I listen to a lot of different people talk about this stuff. And traditionally, growing up for me, it was always like, hey, what are you not great at? And then work at those things. And I think there's some of that, but like maybe a more wise approach is, what are you really good at? And then focus on making those really, really great.
Right.
And I'm not saying like just be a giant mess at stuff and don't work at those type of things, but rather than trying to work overtime on the things that you're really bad at to kind of get yourself to about even, work more on the things you're really good at and become the best at those things, but be aware of what you're not good at. And definitely, again, I'm not saying you should be just so bad that you're hurting people at these things. Like that you should work on, but like where you're not the best at certain things, like find other people that are. And that goes back to collaboration between companies and all that kind of stuff too.
That's good. I think that's a good winding up place. Thanks, guys, for opening up and sharing, and looking forward to kind of exploring this much deeper in the near future.
Love it.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.